Greetings, everyone. Welcome once again to the Sephira Center of Shamanism, where we break down the ancient esoteric practices of shamanism and the occult, bringing them into balance with the deep psyche. My name is Luke, experienced practitioner and mentor of the shamanic and occult sciences. It is an honor to have you here. Thank you for joining me once again. Be sure to check out my Patreon if you have interest in gaining access to my powerful exclusive content. You will find on this Patreon so many pieces of occult related content, over 300 pieces of exclusive content, actually more like 400, very close to 400. I upload multiple times per week, and you will find full initiatory processes through some of the most powerful and advanced occult initiatory systems. You will also find detailed guidance on how you can prepare for these endeavors, as well as the opportunity to receive powerful attunements, transmissions, as well as other ritualistic and alchemical frameworks and operations that you can use to grow closer to your soul's path. Be sure to check that out. First link in the description. Access starts at just £20 per month. And if you want more access to me, then look at tier 3 and onwards to get access to my powerful live occult trading and initiation webinars. Be sure to check that out. I look forward to seeing you there. So today we are going to be discussing the history of the Qliphoth. Now, this is an absolutely fascinating topic simply because of the amount of things that you hear about it, okay? There's so many different interpretations of how the Qliphoth actually came to be. Now, for those who are unfamiliar, the Qliphoth is the dark Qabalah, okay? The shadow of the tree of life. The Qliphoth is one of the most powerful initiatory systems that a practitioner can engage with, but it is also one of the most potentially destabilizing as well. For those who are interested in exploring the Qliphoth, or for those who are exploring the Qliphoth or have explored the Qliphoth, it is important to understand its origins and understand how the literal framework actually came to be. What I will start by saying is that the Qliphoth is only a symbolic framework that represents a gateway into something which is far bigger, far more vast, and much more overwhelming than any of us can actually perceive. We are talking about the primordial chaos, the dark matter space that birthed everything into being in regards to light matter. What we are referring to here is a realm that Kenneth Grant would call Universe B. And Kenneth Grant would also call our light matter multiverse Universe A. I have made a specific video on this, Universe A and Universe B. Be sure to check that out. I've also made loads of videos on the Qliphothic tree, as well as sharing my experience in the Qliphoth. So if you're wanting to know about the different stages of Qliphothic initiation, check out one of the other videos. This is specifically for diving into its history. So the primordial chaos represents essentially the primordial outer layer that is surrounding our universe of light, matter, and form. It holds the architectural drawing for structure and form before it has actually taken on form and been dreamed into being, which means that what the Qliphoth represents, the primordial chaos, is something far more ancient than the multiverse that we are actually dwelling within. So the Qliphoth as an initiatory process represents an initiatory process that is a gateway into the vastness of reality itself, into the literal architecture of reality itself in your microcosm. What you're accessing is your personal primordial chaos, which represents the deepest aspects of your unconscious mind. But how did such a powerful system get developed? How did such a powerful system actually become available to humanity? And what was the actual process in it taking on form, establishing the demonic rulers that are said to rule over it? How did it actually come to be? This is exactly what we are going to be discussing in today's video, so definitely stay tuned. So if the Qliphoth represents the primordial chaos, something so vast that it cannot be consciously comprehended fully, how can something so powerful fit into what is realistically a very limiting structure and framework of 10 spheres and 22 connecting tunnels? How is it possible for that immensity of power to be accessed through that predefined structure? The answer to this is very simple, and it is the fact that these gateways are accessed through the mere belief in their existence alone. The only thing that stops these gateways from actually taking shape and taking on tangible form is our own belief system, our own beliefs as to what reality actually is and what we have been taught is possible versus not possible. So these tangible initiatory systems started to develop around the same time through the sort of Eliphas Levi era, then later the Aleister Crowley era, and then Kenneth Grant. A lot of these ancient systems started to take on these more tangible forms around this time. We are referring specifically to around the 19th century here. So these started to take form simply when the collective consciousness was ready to start comprehending it. And now, as time is going on, these systems are becoming more accessible and more tangible the more people know about them, because they are becoming more known in the collective consciousness. Whereas if you say go back, say 10 centuries, the collective consciousness was not ready or in a place to be able to comprehend something this vast. Okay, the programming of humanity goes back so far, goes back to pre-religion, and it's this programming which has caused humanity to place its potential into a box and limit itself according to how it has been taught is possible to perceive and function in reality. So as humanity begins to realize its full potential, frameworks can then be developed as a means to access that greater potential within both the psyche, symbolically, and literally within the physical, tangible body. And this is exactly what happened with the Qliphoth and also the Sephiroth, the Tree of Life, as well. The Qliphoth represents the primordial chaos, which is so immensely vast, but because of how vast and incomprehensible the primordial chaos is, it could not be accessed through regular societal functioning. A framework had to be shaped that could act as a gateway into the dissolution of societal conditioning and the dissolution of predefined identity to allow the vastness of the primordial chaos to be accessed by the practitioner. And it started to take shape in that symbolic form simply because it made sense to one person and then made sense to another person, and then it gradually spread and became a more tangible concept. It's very similar to the concept of a thought form or an egregore, okay? A thought form or an egregore is cultivated through the mere belief in something alone. So, for example, why do big corporations tend to get more and more powerful as time goes on? Because they have so many individuals feeding into it, okay? By using Amazon every day, for example, you are essentially giving the egregore of Amazon, egregores are collective thought forms, by the way, that the collective consciousness is feeding into, and by using Amazon, you are making it a more tangible form. And it is exactly the same concept as accessing something as deep and as vast as the Qliphoth. So even to the point where if you wanted to, it sounds crazy, I know, but even if you wanted to, you could actually summon Amazon as a collective entity. Okay, if I created a chant and consecrated it with the intention to summon Amazon as a meta-god or collective entity, then I would be able to do that because it is a tangible astral concept. And this is exactly the same with frameworks like the Sephiroth or the Qliphoth. People become aware of a concept, more people hear about it, and the more tangible it becomes. Now, it's a very similar concept with the Necronomicon gnosis. Okay, for those who are not familiar with the Necronomicon gnosis, I have videos on this. But the Necronomicon gnosis was essentially set into motion by author H.P. Lovecraft, horror fiction writer, who was said to access these different planes within his dream state, and then would later actually develop entire stories and pantheons of incomprehensible alien intelligence. Until, let's face it, the last sort of 20, 50 or so years, these entities have been limited to storybook characters, until occultists started to access them as tangible alchemical currents, at which point these literal and symbolic entities have started to take on a more tangible form. So the concept of the Necronomicon, which is literally referring to anything that is hidden underneath the surface, and a means of accessing what is hidden beneath the surface, has become a more tangible concept the more people know about it. Okay, and as I mentioned, it is exactly the same with the Qliphothic realm. So in other words, the more people who are aware of the concept of the daemonic, the concept of what is unseen, the concept of primordial chaos, and the vastness of void energy, the more close it becomes, okay? The closer it gets to the surface of human consciousness, at which point what it represents archetypally begins to be uprooted within the collective consciousness. So the Qliphoth, like any big thing, any corporation, no matter how spiritual, not spiritual, the Qliphoth took on gradual form over the course of over 10 centuries. It took on gradual form, established bit by bit, and then became more and more tangible the more people used it and believed in the concept. You can do this with literally anything as well, okay? I have created systems on my Patreon that are methods of accessing these planetary gateways like you do in the Qliphoth, but you call on incomprehensible forces to do so, like the Necronomicons, Great Old Ones, and the Outer Gods, to act as initiators through that gate. And it works, okay? It works because that tangible concept has been set into motion by me, and then the people in my community then use that tangible concept, and then it establishes a stronger footprint within the astral plane as somebody else uses it. The same goes for the path working I created through the Arabian hell structure, the 7 gates of Jahannam. I was told by many individuals, oh, you can't access the 7 gates of Jahannam. I was like, try me. So I created an initiatory system that can access the 7 gates of Jahannam as a type of symbolic and literal ascent into the different aspects of self. And it worked, okay? And the more people used it, the more powerful the initiatory system became, and the closer to the human realm these forces actually became. Okay, so what we are interacting with here are vast intelligences, and with the Qliphoth and the primordial chaos, intelligences that are so beyond comprehension and so beyond predefined structure and form that you're actually doing them a favor by tapping into that current of energy and creating these initiatory systems, okay? By, say, assigning specific archdaemons to each of the Qliphothic spheres, you're basically giving that specific entity a more tangible form, okay? A more tangible form, and you're giving it more of an influence over the collective consciousness and over your microcosm by actually welcoming those energies in, because they are outside of our multiverse altogether. So you can create any framework and set it into motion through the mere belief in it alone. Why was that not possible, say, 10 centuries ago? In other words, why couldn't the Qliphoth be created that quickly as soon as the concept came about? because of programming. Okay, we have literally centuries of programming within our lineages that are wiring us specifically to detach from our true potential, at which point our identity is established as a means to limit our consciousness to a singular sense of self. I like this, I like that. And at which point you learn what you are good at, what is possible for a human being to attain, and what is not possible for a human being to attain. But it is only a belief system. It is literally a cortex concept which has been set into motion, collectively speaking, through societal and religious programming that keeps you limited to these predefined notions. It's the same with the concept of religion. If you take on that paradigm, then that's exactly what it's going to be for you. For example, if I saw everything that is dark and unseen as evil and the devil, then I am giving those things a power over me by doing that. Okay, and then that's the reality I'm living. I'm running away from myself, so then I'm defining who I am by this predefined paradigm, at which point darkness will always have a power over me. I will always be trying to avoid hell and always running away from it. And that will be the notion that I carry. Okay, so a path working or initiatory system can become anything. Anything that you can possibly imagine. And the only thing that is stopping it from coming into motion and being set into tangible form is your own belief systems. So as more practitioners embark on these initiatory processes and start to use these frameworks to unlock different aspects of themselves, then these path workings get expanded upon. Okay, prime example is what came from the 10 Qliphothic spheres. Kenneth Grant then developed the system of the 22 tunnels of Set to give form to the liminal spaces that are said to be interconnecting the 10 Qliphoth. Later down the line would come to be further initiatory systems into what Kenneth Grant would call the outer darkness, which is beyond the Qliphothic tree altogether. All of these are different ways of interpreting various realms, interpreting various spaces that can be used to access different aspects of your psyche and different aspects of potential within you. Okay, so if somebody performed a Qliphothic initiation rite who does not believe in it, yeah, and does not live in a reality where this is possible, performing a Qliphothic initiatory rite would probably do absolutely nothing. It probably wouldn't do anything because in their microcosm, it is not a concept, okay? It is not a concept. It's reduced to a storybook. Much like how if you see a dragon as a storybook character, okay? Oh yeah, there's this dragon and it's in a storybook. Why is that not real? Why can't that become a real concept, an archetypal entity of the void that you are then tapping into to get to know yourself better? So every mythology, every mythological story has the potential to grant access to alchemical currents. The only thing that stops you from accessing those alchemical currents is your societal level programming. So the reason why these systems are expanding so greatly nowadays and why they become so easily accessible is because the collective consciousness is able to comprehend it more. And as more people get into that and understand that it's a real thing, the more the primordial chaos will be revealed, the more mysteries of the primordial chaos will be revealed through the different practitioners acting as vessels for this energy. So it is a simple but also quite complex concept of understanding that what you make real becomes real, but what influences what you are able to make real is your own belief in the existence of something, whether something exists in your tangible reality or not. So understand that initiatory systems that use the types of things that the Qliphoth and the Sephiroth tap into are not limited to structure and form. Okay, I imagine over the years, throughout history, before the development of religion, I imagine that these consciousness have been tapped into through different means, through different frameworks, and all kinds of things like that, through a means of working with the planets. We're talking about ancient shamanic techniques that go back to ancient shamanic communities, that go back to the ancient civilizations of Atlantis and Lemuria. We're talking about practices that are timeless and that have been accessed long before any predefined system. So when people say the Qliphoth is not a real initiatory process, or even when people say the Qliphoth is cultural appropriation that is ripping apart Judaism, that doesn't make any sense. If something appears even in an ancient Jewish text as the Qliphoth, Sitra Ara, limited to impurity and evil, how is it cultural appropriation? How is it not a real concept? If the Sephiroth is a real concept, and if light is a real concept, why isn't the Qliphoth real? And at the end of the day, if it's not real for you, then it won't be real for you. It is as simple as that. Again, societal programming. Okay, why do barely any people in the collective consciousness become aware of the vastness of occultism? Because their belief systems do not allow them to access it. Okay, they have identities that are predefined and literally thought forms that are set into motion to stop these types of things from coming into place, particularly religious programming. Okay, literal protective parts that use the story of religion to separate themselves more from the vastness of their own potential. So the Qliphoth itself can be traced back, okay, to before the development of Judaism, but it is as valid as the Sephiroth because it shows in the Zohar. But in the Zohar, it was not a structured, tangible system. It wasn't a system that is worked with. It was limited to, okay, it's just the impure forces of the Sephiroth. Referred to as the Qliphoth or Sitra Ara, it was nothing more than impurity in the Zohar. Now, it wasn't until later on, we're referring to, I believe, to be the 13th to 14th centuries, whereby Rabbi Isaac Luria developed Lurianic Qabalah. And in this system of Qabalah, the Qliphoth started to take on a more tangible form that mirrored the Sephiroth in its primordial counterpart. So each sphere was then assigned specific meanings according to the shadow or distorted aspect of that given Sephira. But it was still seen as a force of impurity. It was still seen as a force that is to be avoided. So you can see here that simply through one person, one rabbi, creating a more tangible form out of something that doesn't have a form, instantly the Qliphoth becomes a more tangible system. And it wasn't until later on, through the development of various different occult initiatory systems that were taken, by the way, from ancient frameworks like Qabalah. Okay, occult Qabalah was developed through numerous occult orders. Eliphas Levi has a strong contribution when it comes to the development of the Qliphoth and assigning the specific archdaemons to each of the Qliphothic spheres. Kenneth Grant, and you could say Aleister Crowley as well, but more so Kenneth Grant, that then built upon the Qliphoth more by working with those energies. Then further gnosis came through as to what can be accessed through these realms. And then, lo and behold, the tunnels of Set were born. The system of initiation that interconnects the spheres, representing a stage of initiation that is beyond the spheres themselves and the alchemy that they are able to offer. So it was created with the purpose and shaped with the purpose through these different stages in history. It was shaped with the very purpose to act as a method of accessing human potential that is beyond what can be seen. but how does one access human potential? And why were demonic entities assigned to do that job? Because demonic entities are primordial chaos, they are dark matter in nature, and they eat what is false. So you assign a daemon to one of these Qliphothic spheres, and it takes on the very role that you make it. It takes on the very role to deconstruct that aspect of one's sense of self, and then marks a tangible gateway into the vastness of the primordial chaos, at which point the Qliphoth continues to get more and more powerful because more people are using it as a tangible initiatory system. But does it have set form? No. Okay, that's why when you look at the tree structure, the actual structure of the Qliphoth and the Sephiroth for that matter, the actual structure and the positioning of each of the spheres and the pathways isn't hugely relevant. This is what I mean. It's like I hear also people saying, oh yeah, the Qabalah is inverted. Oh yeah, no, it appears backwards. And then actually you're initiating into this or you're initiating into that. I'm not doubting that these things have been manipulated. Okay, I'm not doubting that in any way. But if there's anything that I've learned from working with these energies myself, is that they're going to take shape according to the story that you're projecting into them. So what you're actually accessing is vast currents of energy that can lead to other currents of energy that have not yet been interpreted through any tangible framework or through any tangible realm. So if I'm accessing the first Qliphothic sphere of Nehemoth, essentially ruled by Namar, and again, the ruler of that sphere depends on the source as well. In some sources, it's Leviathan. And the first realm is called the Lair of Leviathan. Some interpret it as being Mammon, who rules over the Earth sphere. This is what I mean. It doesn't hugely matter, okay, what framework you are working from. Okay, it's the symbolism behind it that really matters, and it's that symbolism that grants you access as the practitioner to the vast current of the unconscious in which that represents. And where the esotericism comes into it is the fact that we are using demonic energy to do so, so we are actually witnessing both a symbolic and a literal deconstruction according to the intention that the Qliphoth was built with. Now, what you really realise when you get into the realms that are beyond the Qliphoth is that you realise the stories that are attached to it. Okay, and you realise how the story of the Qliphoth and the story of occult initiation can actually limit one's evolution. So what the Qliphoth opens the door to is a reality that is beyond what you have been taught, a reality that is beyond the identity that you have been given. And the Qliphoth is the way, or is just one way, should I say, one very tangible and very powerful but potentially dangerous way for some practitioners to access their potential, their unconscious material. Weakening the veil, understanding your unconscious mind and what has been hidden there. That's the role of the demonic, and that's the role of the Qliphoth. And it was created for that purpose by these ancient occultists. And as it's taken on these different forms, then the Qliphoth will be what you make it. This is the thing, okay? If you are using it as a vehicle to fuel your separation, so you're going into it to become more demonic in nature or more unholy in nature, I personally think that's a load of shit. That's my personal viewpoint. I feel like the whole becoming more unholy is just a child stuck in a power struggle, personally. And it's like, oh, I want to become more unholy because I've learned that I'm powerless in society. So I need to become all dark and mysterious. Okay, but for some people who may be operating from trauma responses, that may make more sense. Okay, I use the Qliphoth as an individuation tool to see these forces as aspects of me and to help to master different aspects of myself better, in doing so granting access to different hidden portions of my unconscious mind and different portions of the primordial chaos itself, with the purpose of individuation and shadow integration. And guess what? That's what the Qliphoth does for me. So what you'll find is that many practitioners will project a story into the Qliphoth because that's what it was like for them. In other words, that is what the Qliphoth has done for them, according to their true will, or even according to the structure of their ego. Okay, it's valid. It's open to interpretation. How I'm shaping my Qliphothic realm is as a framework that I can use to liberate myself and a framework that I can use to essentially individuate, okay, to understand how my parts have been fragmented, to understand who I am beyond societal programming so that I can actually shape reality and evolve using my own genuine autonomy. So the Qliphoth was shaped gradually. Okay, the three core stages, you could say, of Qliphothic development, or the development of the Qliphothic system of initiation, is these three stages. It is the Zohar, appearing in the ancient texts, limited to only impurity and evil, no tangible Qliphothic form. Lurianic Qabalah, whereby the Qliphoth started to be assigned specific qualities that mirror the Sephiroth in its primordial aspect. And then the development of occult Qabalah through sources like Eliphas Levi, Aleister Crowley, and Kenneth Grant. And then it becomes a tangible system, okay, those three core stages. But of course, there is a process to that, and it's largely due to the readiness of society. You know, so for example, there is a book, a very good occult book, classic grimoire, called the Simon Necronomicon. Some of you may be familiar with it. But you probably agree with me when I say that the Simon Necronomicon, for those who have read it, is extremely complicated. Okay, like I feel unnecessarily complicated. Okay, yes, it's very intricate. Yes, it's very ritualized. It's built off of a lot of separation consciousness. But it is a very complicated read, and it's hard to comprehend and understand if you do not how to look if you do not know how to look for the symbolism in things. Why was it so complicated? The book was published in the 70s and was giving access to a path working which at the time, with all of the religious programming, was so beyond comprehension. Okay, so it means that that was the capacity in which that information was able to come through at that time. And now you could repurpose the what they call the zoni in the Simon Necronomicon, the seven planetary gates. You could reinterpret that yourself, make it simpler, and access those gates through easier means that are more, say, trauma informed instead of ritualistic. So this is the thing. These things are supposed to evolve, and they are supposed to become more accessible. Okay, and this is how the Qliphothic path has actually developed. Okay, what it represents is something far bigger and far more incomprehensible, primordial chaos. But the actual initiatory system has taken gradual shape over time. Taken gradual shape, and the more people have known about it, the more people have used it, the stronger the astral footprint becomes, the stronger the whole thought form and symbolic concept of it becomes, and then the more powerful and the more vast it becomes. So the Qliphoth is real. Okay, the Sephiroth is real. Any initiatory system that you make real through your own belief is real. The only thing that limits it and stops it from being tangible is your own conditioning and your own pre-programmed beliefs as to what is possible versus not possible. Absolutely essential to understand for those who are diving into this process. But I think that is everything that I need to discuss. Massive topic, but thank you guys. Hit like and subscribe. Don't forget to check out my Patreon, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.